Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a jarring, real-world mystery that's currently baffling doctors and researchers all over the globe: the completely inexplicable rising rates of early-onset colon cancer. It's a massive health anomaly that sparked intense debate, and recently a fascinating study surfaced suggesting a potential culprit that literally no one expected. We're going to take a close look at what the science says, what the skeptics are arguing, and how everyday people are reacting to it all.
Here's our quick roadmap for today. We'll start with the young colon cancer problem, look at the potential weed killer connection, dive into environmental contamination concerns, explore the scientific pushback, and finally, wrap up with some practical steps and solutions.
All right, let's jump right into section 1, the young colon cancer problem.
So this is the fundamental question, isn't it? Why are younger people suddenly getting colon cancer? It's the exact question that sparked a recent study in the journal Nature Medicine. Business Insider covered it, and that coverage subsequently ignited this absolutely massive viral discussion thread on Reddit. People in that community, just everyday citizens, are incredibly concerned. As some of them pointed out, folks who were raised on TV dinners back in the 1960s just weren't getting sick like this. So what changed?
Well, what's really fascinating, and honestly kind of scary, about this mystery is the specific demographic. The issue isn't just that cancer rates are rising across the board, it's that they are inexplicably rising in people under 50. The study we're exploring actually noted that the potential culprit they identified did not appear significantly linked to cases of colorectal cancer in adults over 70. So whatever is driving this trend, it's leaving a really unique mark specifically on younger generations.
Which brings us to section 2, the weed killer connection. To understand how researchers made this connection, we really have to talk about DNA methylation. Think of this as the master mechanism controlling how and when our genes turn on and off. Senior author Jose Cioni and his team of computational biologists basically set out to look for unique chemical signatures left on this DNA. You can picture them almost like fingerprints. You see, the things we're exposed to over a lifetime actually leave a telltale fingerprint right on our DNA.
And Sawan's team found some very specific fingerprints in the DNA of the young colorectal cancer tumors they were studying. They were able to link these marks back to several identified exposures. Some were pretty expected, like smoking, obesity, poor diets lacking fresh veggies and Mediterranean staples, and even educational attainment, which is often closely tied to diet. But then came the major surprise, the weed killer Picloram. Picloram is a widely used herbicide that's designed to kill off woody plants and shrubs while keeping grasses totally intact.
Now, let's move into section 3, environmental contamination concerns.
When this study hit the public sphere, the pain points and the sheer environmental anxiety were palpable. Just consider this visceral reaction from Reddit user Sabrina_Ivanov OG, who wrote, "The issue is it leaks into the local water sources. Imagine feeding your baby formula made from tap water that has picloram in it." You see, people aren't just reading this as some abstract scientific paper. They are terrified about how these chemicals might linger for months or even years in the environment, slowly seeping into our daily lives.
And the community was quick to actively trace out their feared contamination path. As one user pointed out, Picloram is heavily used in agriculture to clear pastures, leaving fields with zero weeds and just grass. From that treated pasture, dairy and meat cows graze on the land. Eventually, the community fears these chemicals just leak directly into local water sources. The prevailing dread is that a person could technically be eating meat, drinking milk, and showering in tap water that has all been contaminated.
And you know, the anxiety goes even deeper than that. A lot of users feel completely surrounded. As one user emphatically typed out, with a very clear sense of disbelief, it's like 1,000,000,000% in our food system. The discussion even brought up historical chemicals, with users noting that Agent White, which was used historically alongside Agent Orange, actually contained picloram. The deep underlying fear here is that modern pesticides and minerals just cycle completely through the biosphere, inevitably ending up inside of us.
But let's hit pause for a second. Section 4, debating the scientific validity.
Is that level of intense fear scientifically justified right now? We really have to juxtapose the study's claim against its critics. The researchers definitely aim to show a new environmental risk factor signal using those DNA fingerprints. However, medically literate critics in the community, like user Grumpy Alien, aggressively push back. They argued that this paper heavily relies on indirect exposure proxies rather than direct measurements. They literally called it a proxy-on-proxy association, pointing out that the authors outright admit they never measured picloram exposure directly in the patients themselves.
So, an absolutely crucial point of contention is the data sample. Critics pointed to the incredibly small sample sizes used to make such a massive headline-grabbing claim.
Get this, the initial discovery set looked at just 31 early-onset tumors versus 100 late-onset tumors. For skeptical readers, that tiny amount of data just didn't carry anywhere near enough weight to definitively name Picloram as the smoking gun for a global cancer rise.
The methodological pushback was actually quite extensive. First, skeptics pointed out that the researchers extrapolated those DNA methylation fingerprints from the blood of male farmers and then somehow applied them to colon tumor tissues in entirely different patients. Second, critics called the county-level pesticide data an ecological soup, suggesting it is highly prone to regional confounding factors. On top of that, they noted potential novelty bias from an oncology center looking for a big headline and highlighted financial ties to pharma companies among the authors. Finally, they reminded everyone that the International Agency for Research on Cancer still lists Picloram as Group 3. That means it is currently not classifiable as carcinogenic to humans. In short, many believe the paper shows correlation, not direct causation.
Okay, so where does all this leave us? Section 5, Practical Steps and Solutions.
How do we move from the friction of this scientific debate and all that environmental anxiety into actual empowering actions? Well, based on both the study's findings and the community dialogue, we have some actionable takeaways. First, the study heavily noted that poor diets lacking Mediterranean staples were linked to those cancer fingerprints. So eating fresh vegetables, beans, and nuts is absolutely key. Now, as some users ironically pointed out, eating more vegetables could technically expose you to more agricultural chemicals. Therefore, our second takeaway is to be highly mindful of pesticide exposure on your produce. Wash it thoroughly or buy organic when you can. Finally, to address that profound anxiety about local water sources, considering a high-quality tap water filtration system for your home is a really practical step that you actually have control over.
We've definitely covered a lot of ground today, from a very mysterious health crisis to complex DNA science and some heated community debates. It leaves us with a final provocative thought. How do we best navigate modern environmental health risks while we wait for definitive science? The reality is, the exact cause of rising young colon cancer remains a bit of a mystery. But protecting our bodies and our environment doesn't have to wait for the final scientific verdict. Stay curious, stay objective, and take those proactive steps for your own health. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.